Hello, my powerful and wonderful grammarians. In this little mini lecture, I'm going to be explaining to you about that clauses and which clauses, otherwise known as restrictive clauses, those are that clauses, and non-restrictive clauses, those are which clauses. Now, why might you even care about knowing about that and which clauses? Well, they're very, very prominent in a lot of English sentences, which means you are very likely to come across them in some of your CBJ analyses that you're doing for this semester. Also, if you will think back to the beginning of the term, you'll remember that I passed out first week or two a list of 20 most common errors, one of which is missing commas on which clauses. In other words, missing commas on non-restrictive clauses. Also, once you get the hang of them, that and which clauses are just plain fun to know how to manipulate and how to identify. Okay, so first a definition. That clauses, otherwise known as restrictive clauses, restrict the meaning of a noun or a noun clause. And so they are essential to the identity of that noun or noun clause. This is in contrast to which clauses, or non-restrictive clauses, which simply offer more commenting information about the noun or the noun phrase, and which clauses are set off on both sides by commas. There's a nice little mnemonic that you might want to keep in mind to help you remember the definition of which clauses, and that is, of course, that they use commas. Both sides of a which clause are set off by commas, and also they comment on the noun or the noun phrase, so we might call them comma-enting clauses. So in this microlecture, I'm going to be giving you a few examples, showing a few of these in context, and then giving you the opportunity to practice writing a few of your own. Now here, we're going to look at a couple of examples of that clauses and which clauses. If you'll follow me here, we have an example of a that clause. The book that I am reading now is full of cliffhanger chapter endings. Now, what's understood by this restrictive clause is that I have read many books in the past, and in fact, I might be reading many books right now, and I will continue reading many more books in the future. The that clause is used to restrict the meaning to a particular book. That is, the book that I am reading now. Contrast the that clause with the which clause. And once again, the which clause is always going to be set off on both sides by commas. Let's take a look at that example. The book, comma, which cost me only $1, comma, contains many Gothic tales. And here you might be able to hear in that sentence that the which clause is functioning almost like an aside, an extra comment on the book. It is not essential to the independent clause, to the identity of that clause, of that opening noun or subject. And if you were to strip away the non-restrictive clause, the which clause, the sentence would still make sense. The book contains many Gothic tales. One other additional piece of information that could be useful. You might possibly be wondering why that clauses and which clauses are even called clauses at all, since the definition of a clause is that it contains both a subject and a verb. And if you look at these, they don't look really like independent clauses, but let's examine them a bit more closely. So for these types of clauses, that and which are special function words that either introduce the clause, I am reading now, in that last that clause, or that function as subjects in the clauses, which cost me only $1. And here you might think of which as being replaced by the pronoun it. And if we do that substitution, we get it cost me only $1, which certainly does meet the parameters and the requirements for an independent clause. All right, so second to the last part here. I have a few sentences below, and I'm wondering if you can do two things. Identify where you see that clauses, and can you tell me whether those are restrictive or non-restrictive clauses, and also identify where you see which clauses. And again, apply that same thought process to them. Ask yourself whether they are restrictive or non-restrictive clauses. Okay, and in this last section of the microlecture, it's time now for the interactive piece. I'd like you to write 3 sentences using that clauses, using restrictive clauses, and 3 sentences using non-restrictive clauses. Thanks for listening.